Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. We're the Gnomes of. This is Sharon Oyella, and today we're building an acorn house. Now at the time of this introduction, the house is not complete. I'm still working on it. I'm still working on the exterior. I'm also working on the interior with lights and things like that. So I'm going to show you how to put the shell together in this video, and we're also going to be adding some paper clay. Please keep in mind that I had no plan in place when I started building. I changed my mind a bunch of times. And that is true me. If you've been following me for any length of time at all, you'll understand that pretty much is how I put things together. But if you can design something before you start, it would make your life a lot easier. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to get the basic shell of the acorn made. And for that, I'm using heavy duty foil. You don't have to use the same. If you use lightweight foil, you're going to be using more foil than I do in this video. So this is heavy duty. It's 18 inches wide, so it's extra wide as well. And then we're going to be using masking tape, so make sure that your foil doesn't say non-stick because we need masking tape to stick to it. And we're also going to be using some cardboard. In addition to those things, you're going to need some white glue. In this video, I'm using Elmer's glue wall. I'm also going to be using book pages, but you can change that out for newspaper, any paper of your choice, and some thin material such as cheesecloth or something like that scarf I was just holding up. In this video, I also use paper clay. Now, when I started, I wasn't planning on doing that. This paper clay video right here is in a separate video, and that will be linked in the pinned comment below. So I make paper clay out of egg cartons. I also, in that same video, made paper clay using cardboard. So all you need is paper and some glue and some flour. So if you're interested in that, again, that video will be linked in the pinned comment below. All right, my friends, let's get started. All right, so I'm going to work out the basic shape of an acorn. So that's a rounder and fatter at the top, and then comes down to more of a pointy bottom. So I rolled off a piece. Once it was folded in half, I had about a 12-inch piece. So it's 12 inches by 18 inches wide. And now I'm going to pull the bottom corners together and just tape those in place. And that will give me that basic shape at the bottom. And I'm going to stabilize this with a piece of cardboard. So I made like an egg shape piece of cardboard there, and it's about 6 inches by about 4.5 inches. I'm just going to tape this into the bottom. Once that was taped in, I went ahead and added tape to the entire inside surface, and that gives me a lot more stability to work with. And now I can extend the sides out by a few inches. So I'm just going to add a piece of foil on this side, and again, this is a folded piece of foil, and I'm going to tape this in. So there we go, I've taped the interior again, and that extended that a couple of inches. Now I'll do this other side. And then once that was all taped in, I wanted to create more of a bowl shape, so I just had to split it down the center, and I can add a piece of foil here. So I can just pull the piece apart as far as I want it to go, then I'll just tape this in. And you can see that adds at the top there, probably 3 inches more. The next thing I did was I added to the height. Now I did not know I was going to do that when I started. This just kind of evolved. So I added about 4 inches of height there. And again, that's just folded foil and then taped it in. Now I can do the other side, but now that's going to give me room to have 2 floors in the acorn instead of 1. All right, so my interior walls are just masking tape over foil, and I want to have paintable walls. So I need to change the surface here. I'm going to be adding book pages. These book pages are torn on all 4 sides. You can use newspaper as well, guys. I just didn't have any newspaper on hand. Okay, so I'm going to be painting glue onto the masking tape, placing my paper into the glue, and then painting glue over top of that. You always want to make sure that you're putting your paper into glue, okay? Don't ever put it on something dry, otherwise it won't stick, right? So I'm going to do the entire interior surface with book pages. Again, you can use newspaper or paper towel or any sort of paper. And once that material is dry, then you have a paintable surface. Before I painted mine, I decided to add a floor. This is just painted cardboard, and I've since changed my mind. I'm not going to be using this. I'm going to cover this up later. So when I do cover it up, we'll go over the floors then. But again, this is just painted cardboard. I'm going to put tacky glue all the way around the edge, and then I will install it. I'll stick something heavy on it, make sure it's level. Stick something heavy on it so that there's full contact between the floor and the walls as it's drying. And I decided to go ahead and paint, and I'm using antique white to paint the entire inside surface. When you paint over something that you've done paper mache, it's going to crack like this. Lots of cracks in there, and that's totally normal. It's just the glue and the paint as it's drying will crack. So I had to do another coat or 2 over top. Anyways, moving on, I'm going to cut out a door. I just used a doll there for the height. And once I got that cut out, I'm going to use her for the window height as well. And once I got those cut out, I did hot glue in twine all the way around the edges. And over top of that, I'm going to paint white glue. So I hot glued them in just to hold them in until I can get the white glue on there. And the twine is great because it will just mold to any shape that the wall is. And to cover up the foil here, I'm using thin pieces of fabric. So just white glue and then place the fabric into the glue and then paint glue over the fabric. That will cover up that exposed foil. And you can see I've added book pages to the exterior walls, which I did not need to do. At the time that I started this project, I did not know I was making paper clay. Had I known I was making paper clay, I would have left them as foil walls and I would have put paper clay right over the foil. Anyways, once all of that was dried, I went ahead and painted it burnt umber. Now these are going to change later in the project. I just did what I could there just to kind of give me an idea, and then I'll come back to those later. Anyways, just going to cut a hole here for the fireplace, and I'm going to hot glue in some foil. And then once this was hot glued, I add a little bit more foil to shape it out, and then masking tape over that. Again, had I known I was going to make paper clay, I could have just put the paper clay right over the foil. But I was planning on using paper stones, but then I changed my mind later. So I completely covered the foil with the masking tape, and now I'm dipping a piece of paper towel into glue here, getting the excess off, and then I'll just lay this over the masking tape. That would have given me a surface for paper stones, but again, I changed my mind, and I went ahead and used paper clay, so all of these steps were needless. But it's good to know that you can do it this way in case you don't have any clay on hand. In fact, I'll put a video in the pinned comment below and I'll title it Paper Stones in case you want to do it that way. Alright, so I'm just going to finish covering this up and we'll be right back. Alright, so once that was covered up, I was playing around with a floor idea, which later changed. But what I'm doing here is I'm sticking in a top piece. I'm just going to hot glue this in because hot glue is not permanent. I'm going to hot glue this in just to hold the shape of the walls for me. So this is going to be a temporary piece. You can see in the top there, I'm putting some hot glue along the sides. Once that top piece was temporarily in, I could stick my second floor in. And again, this is going to be coming out later, so it's just a floor that I thought I was going to use but decided not to. Now I have made my paper clay, and I went ahead and I covered it over the fireplace, as you can see. A layer of paper clay, and I just made lines for stones with a tool. Okay? Now to get full contact between the walls and that second floor, I added a string, and that I pulled it tight. So as the glue is drying, it's got full contact. What I'm doing right now is I'm making a stability post for my cap. So I used a glass vase and then I hot glued a thin piece of cardboard on top. And that's going to help hold the top of the cap up. Right now I'm building the rim of the cap, and that is just folded foil or rolled up foil all the way around and hot glued in. Now I can put the top of the cap in and just shape this as I go. I did my masking tape some of the pieces together, but then I decided to, instead of adding book pages on top of this, I'm using cloth. So this is cheesecloth. You can use any thin fabric. You dip it in glue and then you get the excess glue off, of course. You just wring it out and then you can lay it over top. Once it's dry, it's super strong. Now listen to this. Once it's dry, I'm going to knock on it here. Super strong. What you're hearing underneath is just the foil, but the exterior itself is very strong. And you can see I didn't do masking tape over the entire surface of the cap, just masking tape enough to hold it together. And you can see the inside there. I'm going to leave that foil in place while I add the paper clay over top my cap. If I was to do this over again, I would have added more stability underneath the cap. Once I added the clay, it kind of softened up the fabric, and the fabric dipped in certain areas on the very top, just due to the weight. So keep that in mind when you're building yours. You want to have enough stability underneath that cap to hold the clay up while it dries. And you can see I've already done the walls themselves as well, so that's just a thin layer of paper clay and smoothed out as much as I could. Now I'm just going to make the stem, so I just did a piece of foil. I'm going to hot glue this right on top in the center. And once that was done, then I can just add the paper clay. Now you can see I didn't add anything to my stem. The paper clay can go right over foil and it will dry just fine like that. So I'm just going to spread this out as evenly as I can over the entire surface. And once I got that all covered up, there's a few places I just wanted to smooth out. So I'm going to take my fingers, dip them in water, and just run them over the entire surface, just kind of smoothing out the bigger bumps. And I thought I had filmed this, but I didn't. The stem itself, once I got the paper clay on there, I did do some texture work using my awl. So that was making lines into it, make it look like wood, and added a few bumps here and there to make it look like a rugged stem. And to give the texture of the acorn cap, I'm using this rolly tool. So I just went over the entire surface, just lightly rolling in that texture. I'm sure there's other ways to get texture in here, but this was the best thing that I could think of at the time. And as it was drying, this is where I noticed that it was starting to dip in certain places where there wasn't enough stability underneath the cap. So I'm noticing these now, and it's not totally dry, so I can fix some of them. Parts of it is dry, and that's just going to be stuck the way it is. And they're not so noticeable. They're just noticeable to me because it's my project, and of course, all imperfections will be screaming out loud at whoever's building, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to add some more stability underneath this piece. You can see underneath here, I just did a makeshift thing with a piece of wood and some masking tape, just trying to push the underside of the cap upwards and get rid of some of those bigger dips. Now, if I hadn't seen the dips as they were drying, I could have fixed them afterwards just by adding more foil. Like I'm doing here on the left side, I'm pointing to the foil, I just hot glued that in place. And that was to give me a better shape around the window, so it looked more symmetrical to the other side, because I had a dip here as well, and I needed to fix that. So again, I just had to hot glue in a piece of foil, and now I'm putting paper clay right over top of that, and that will fix any dips in the cap. If I wanted to go ahead and add some more to the cap, this is how I would fix it. So there is ways of fixing it if it's dried in position and you don't like that position. Alright, so I have a piece of cardboard underneath my acorn now, and that's just so I can build some stuff around the acorn and have a floor to build on. This was a piece of wood that I just hot glued some foil to for legs, and I'm going to use this as my front porch. Now I'm just going to place this, I'm not gluing this in position yet, I just want it there so I know where my door frame is going to end. So now I'm adding some foil to make a door frame, also window frames as well. So you just have to hot glue these pieces in. You can outline and do whatever shapes you needed to do with the foil, and then you can add your paper clay. Before I added my paper clay here, I realized I should probably do the second floor. Now, it is way easier to have a design figured out before you add the paper clay. Once the paper clay is on there and it's dry, it's super hard to cut into. I had to use a saw, and you can see me using pliers here to break away the pieces. So what I'm trying to do here is add a door. So it's going to be French doors there, and then my two windows on the side I had to cut very carefully to get a round shape. So again, way easier if you can figure it out before you add the paper clay. So once I had that done, now I'm going to be removing my foil on the inside cap because I want to do something up there. I think I'll be painting it, or I'm not too sure at this point, but I just needed to remove the foil on the top there. And now I'm going to be adding my cardboard permanently here, so I'm just hot gluing it in. And now I'm going to be building a tree here. And this kind of evolved again. I had no idea it was going to end up as awesome as it did. So I'm just starting with a trunk. I'm going to hot glue some pieces in there to make a tree trunk. And then I remembered that I had a bay window that would probably work in this area right here. I was so excited when I realized I still had this bay window unused. So I removed that second floor, and I cut a hole here on the side, and my bay window is going to fit right here. So I just have to cut it down to make it fit. So I'm going to cut right here. It's super easy to do because it's all cardboard. And again, guys, this is a tutorial here on YouTube, and I'll put that link for you in the pinned comment below. And they're really easy to put together. I love bay windows. They add a lot of character. So now I'm starting to get flooded with ideas, and I'm going to be adding a trunk on this side as well. So I'm already thinking ahead. I'm going to add a branch here because my top floor is going to need a little bit of a porch. So I'm going to use the branches of the tree to kind of hold up my porch. So now I'm going to cover up all the foil with paper clay, and I did all of that, and then in front of the windows here, in the very center, there's no foil underneath those little bits of branches going up along the window frames. So it's just paper clay, kind of like in worm shapes. So you can do it that way as well. You don't need foil all the time. You can shape out paper clay in worm shapes, snake shapes, any shapes that you want, and they'll dry just fine. There is a little bit of shrinkage, just keep that in mind. As it dries, there will be a little bit of shrinkage if there's no foil underneath. Couple things to keep in mind when you're working with paper clay is it has to be completely dry before you paint it or add any foil on top. Okay, so every time you saw me adding foil over top my paper clay, that paper clay was completely dried. I use fans to dry mine. I also stick it into a room that's on the hotter side. So depending on the temperature in your place and whether or not you use fans will determine how long it takes to dry. So it can be overnight up to a couple of days of dry time. So let's get some rough measurements here. The basic shell, excluding the trees from side to side, is about 12 inches wide at the wider part, and then approximately 9 inches deep. And the shell itself is approximately 11 inches tall. The cap is approximately 14 inches wide by about 4.5 inches tall. So along with those measurements, keep in mind that I covered the entire exterior shell. I also did the cap and then 2 extra smaller caps, the porches, window frames, and door frames, 3 separate trees, a chimney, and then the fireplace on the inside. So the amount of pulp that I used, I'm not talking about all the ingredients that goes into it, I'm just talking about the paper pulp itself. I ended up using for that Acorn house about 24 cups of paper pulp that was made out of egg cartons and cardboard. So today I'm making another batch, and in that bowl in front of me is 10 cups of paper pulp. If you want to see how I break down paper to get to this stage here, of course you'll visit the other video. I just want to throw in a couple of extra things here, just for information's sake. What you just saw me putting in there is wood glue. Now in my original video, I always use white glue, but I ran out of white glue. So wood glue will work, okay? So that's just for your benefit of knowing that yes, you can use wood glue. So I'm going to mix all of this together. When I was done mixing, that clay was usable as it was, but in this batch, I'm going to stick in some drywall compound. I'm going to stick in a heaping cupful into there. I'm going to mix it all up. And now this just made a smoother clay. You don't have to add drywall compound, but it is an option, and that will give you a smoother clay, and you can add in more details into this clay. Okay, so a little bit of information for you guys. Hopefully it's helpful. All right, my friends, we're going to end it here. And if you're interested in seeing part 2, that should be popping up on your screen. If not, just look in the pinned comment below. Hit that link and we'll see you over there. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you soon.